couple guys that I talk with about baseball on that show that do a great job covering baseball for us, and we're just kicking off coverage. So we got Joe Rampe, formerly of the Tigers Minor League Report, but now of the Tigers Intelligence Report, which, Joe, with my intelligence background, I got to have somebody on that if they're from an outfit like the Tigers Intelligence Report. So happy to have you on and happy to talk some baseball, because Jeff is very happy, my producer, to talk some baseball too. So you'll have two of us gnawing your ear off. But welcome to the show, Joe.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Definitely. Yeah, we're glad you can come on and talk some baseball. We've got a lot of baseball to talk about. There's a lot of different places that we could start, because this is going to be an interesting year. They now have the weight of some expectations here for the Tigers. I think people were a little disappointed in how last season ended. I really wasn't in that camp, I have to say. I thought they had a pretty good year. I know that they kind of scuffled a little bit down the stretch, but they started out free agency quite slow, and then they kind of ramped up as things went on. They've added some veteran pitching, but I think people are clamoring for a bat here. But Joe, I was reading the Tigers Intelligence Report that you and Lynn Henning do, and it's great stuff on there. And I want to have Lynn on the show at some point in time too, as well as having you back on my show. But you did some good in-depth pieces about some of the arms, because that's where the focus has been here in the season so far. I think they're trying to make sure that they don't have a situation like last year where it did feel like they leaned a little too heavily on certain players, where it was like, okay, Tommy Kahnle is okay as part of the bullpen, but they used them a little bit too much, overextended them, and then that caused some trouble where he wasn't as valuable down the stretch. Same with some of the other arms. It just seemed like they were a little bit worn out. Holton, Vest held up all right, but they reinforced the bullpen, and they reinforced the starting rotation, knowing that Olsen would likely be out now for the year with his surgery. So, but you covered a couple pieces that I feel like we haven't talked about a lot, because a lot of the attention went to Verlander once he got signed. Of course, there's going to be a ton of attention on Skubal going through the arbitration thing and him being the ace. But you wrote a couple great pieces on Valdez and Melton, who are two key arms that I feel like could factor in here. Obviously, Valdez is going to be at the top end of the rotation, and now you've made Melton a lot more flexible in what he can do, because you've kind of filled in some of those spots. So now you can kind of use Melton where he's at his most advantageous.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was pretty sad to see that it sounds like Melton's already dealing with some right arm soreness. And so that's why, I think some people were kind of wondering, as soon as when Verlander and Valdez signed on the same day, it was kind of like, well, what about Reese Olson? What about Troy Melton? And I think that we're seeing why teams do load up on starting pitching, because you just never know. I think that the Tigers used something like 10 to 13 starting pitchers last year. You just never know. And spring training, to me, is a dangerous time for pitchers as well, because they're ramping up after the off season. So that's part of why I liked the Valdez signing so much, is that he's proven that he's durable and he can eat a lot of innings and put up good results while eating those innings. And you touched on the bullpen getting worn down. I think between 2024 and 2025, the Tigers might have the most relief innings pitched out of any team. And Will Vest and Tyler Holton have been used a lot. I think they're both right around the top 10 over the last 2 years. So bringing Valdez aboard should help out a lot there. And Justin Verlander was pretty reliable the second half of last year too. And I think he can. I would pencil him in for somewhere around 150 innings as well. And then with Valdez, you're hoping for something closer to 200. But I liked bringing those two in. It did I felt like it kind of salvaged the off season for some fans. But you touched on it earlier too. I think that a lot of people were hoping for a bat. But to me, I think that there's a lot of upside with the offense. and just, kind of hope that the pitching staff can stay healthy and you get some of the younger guys take a leap this year.
I agree, and I hadn't heard about the Melton soreness, although it is in the in spring training, so hopefully that's not too serious. But I do like that this year there doesn't have to be an overreaction to, okay, well, we're missing this one arm, because it does feel like last year, I mean, Joe was talking about it, Jeff, but yeah, it just felt like we saw those same bullpen arms, and I was talking about it all the time on the show. We saw, I like Holton. I think he's very valuable to this team and to the bullpen and as kind of a flex starter. But you look at his innings pitched and you're thinking, I know he's not a starter, but to be used on that many days and in the ways that he was, I think he was a little overextended, and he did what he could, but the human body only has so much to give.
Yeah, and Canely was a nice story in the beginning, but once you saw him a few times without having that 95, 96 mile an hour fastball, forget it. He got hit hard late in the year, and then, yeah. Joe, how serious is the Melton injury? I listened to A.J. Hinch's interview, and he said we're going to take it really, really, really slow bringing him back. Is this a concern that could last into May or June, or is it just something they're just going to work him back in so he can, be there at the start of the season?
Yeah, I think that we'll probably find out a little bit more. The Tigers do those injury reports every once in a while, and it sounds like they're still kind of trying to get it figured out. But anytime that they say right arm soreness and we have to shut this guy down, it's concerning to me. The reports were trickling out about Olsen kind of beforehand. I think Evan Petzold had it that he wouldn't be ready for opening day, and then all of a sudden he was out for the season. And I'm not saying that Melton's situation is anything like that. The only thing that I've seen is what some of the beat writers have put out there about that. It's just general arm soreness, and that's. I think that could just as easily be just a normal spring training thing. Guys are ramping up, so I don't think it's anything unusual. But it's certainly concerning anytime that you have to shut someone down. Exactly,
and I mean, especially in baseball, you look at these guys and you think, okay, well, they're young guys. Well, the young guys are the ones that are getting a lot of the Tommy John. That's what he has, but the Tommy John surgery is a lot of the wearing down of the arm. There's just so much torque and pressure on these guys' arms. So hopefully he'll be able to make it through here and contribute, because I do think he can be a valuable arm. But the good news is that we do have a lot of reinforcements this year. It does feel like if one guy goes down, it's not going to be as much pressure on another guy, whether it's with the starting rotation, with the middle relief, or with the back end, which is really where I thought they had to improve, because they were putting a lot of pressure on Holton. They were using Canely, as Jeff said. I liked Canely. I think I was a Canely sympathist for most of the year, but he doesn't really have a large variety of pitches, as we know, and the velocity is not there, and people kind of figured him out. Plus, even in the early going, the advanced statistics were not great on him, because he was just getting hard hit balls, but they were going right to people, so you kind of knew that was a domino waiting to fall. But now they've reinforced things, and now it feels like, because really I look at A.J. Hinch as he's a guy that you just want to give him as many chess pieces as you can, because he's playing 3D, 4D. He might even be playing 5D chess. I don't even know what that is, but he might be playing it. I'm not smart enough to understand it, but you've got to give him the pieces, and now he's got some back end high leverage relievers where I think they could keep everybody, hopefully health pending, healthy and fresh for the year, when you just go situationally at the end and you say, okay, is this more of a Vest situation? Is this a Jansen situation? Is this a Finnegan situation? And you've got some high leverage guys along with some innings eaters on the front side, and some guys that maybe you stretched too far, a Montero, a Melton, guys that didn't necessarily need to start or weren't initially pegged to start, but were moved into starters roles or too heavy of roles. Now you've got all those guys in the middle, Holton, the rest of those guys, and I feel like they've right-sized the pitching staff as a whole.
Yeah, I agree. And there was right at the beginning of the offseason, there's a lot of attention on Flaherty and Torres coming back, and rightfully so. And I'm glad to have those guys back. You could argue about their salaries maybe being a little bit higher than what they would have gotten on multi-year deals. But to me, if you would have told every major league team we will sign, if Torres and Flaherty would have been available for a 1-year deal, I think that their salaries would have been right where they are. But right after that happened, they signed Drew Anderson, who had been pitching in the KBO. And if you look at his MLB resume, it's not great. But he made some major changes last year over in the KBO. His velocity has crept up, and he added a kick change that got a lot of whiffs last year. I think it was up over 50%, a 50% whiff rate. And he looked pretty good in that first spring training game. And you touched on Kiter Montero. I think that his stuff would tick up in short stints in the bullpen. So I actually really like the composition of the Tigers bullpen. I think that if Drew Anderson is in the bullpen, there should be pretty much 6 spots locked up right now between Jansen, Finnegan, Vest, Holton, Herter, and Anderson. But I like the flexibility of having 2 spots available for guys that you can either, option guys out if the bullpen needs a fresh arm. You have 2 spots that you can send guys out, or if a team's coming in with a lot of lefties, you could call up 2 lefties for that series. The Tigers kind of did that last year, and I think that they're kind of playing it series by series, and I think that they are really well equipped to do that this year too.
I agree, and it did seem like the opposite at times last year, where it was like, regardless of the scenario, it was like, oh, okay, well, here's Canely. We don't know what else to do. Here's Canely. Let's
Absolutely.
Just throw him out there. And I'm really ragging on Canely. I actually did like him last year as far as the story went, and I thought he was off to a good start. But he was just overused. He was overutilized, and now they'll be able to avoid that. You were nodding your head, Jeff. I've heard this pitcher mentioned for kind of an underrated acquisition. This is a name I'm hearing a lot that Joe was talking about. This guy that came over from the KBO. That's an interesting one because we don't know what we're going to get out of a guy like that, but it does seem like a lot of people are high on him as opposed to kind of his level of experience, but what they're seeing out of him, the potential. This is a guy that people are interested in. I think this might be our new Joe. You've been part of this, so I have a streak going on Sports Intel. Whenever we do a baseball interview, we cannot. I think we're contractually obligated to bring up Hyu Lee. Every time somebody has brought him up, and it even happened. I interviewed Brandon Day on Monday, and he still snuck Hyu Lee on. It was like at minute 35. He was like right at the end, and I said, "Phew, okay, now Hyu Lee's people won't come and get us or whatever." But yeah. I'm wondering if Anderson will be that guy this year, because I feel like I'm hearing his name a lot.
Yeah, and man, Brandon's doing some great work at Bless You Boys. His prospect write-ups have been amazing. I don't know how he finds the time. He does a great job with Bless You Boys. But yeah, I remember last spring training how Hyu Lee was. He was getting a lot of press, and for good reason. He's very talented. Some of his numbers weren't great last year at AAA, but some of his advanced metrics were better than what they showed on the surface. So, and he was also extremely young for the league too. So, I think that I could see him bouncing back this year. And now that our old friend Andy Ibanez is gone, that role it's Jahmai Jones deserves the first crack at it, but guys like Hao Lee and Max Anderson give the Tigers some flexibility. If someone goes down, they can bring them up, play second or third. So yeah, and I agree. I think that Drew Anderson will be a story this spring, and it seems like he might be first in line if one of the top 5 rotation guys has to unfortunately miss any time. I feel like Anderson might be the first. It would be between him and Kiter Montero most likely as the first guy to fill in now that Melton's. It seems like he might not be ready for opening day if that's the case.
And that still does feel like better reinforcements than what they had before, too. So it'll be interesting to see those guys. I do want to talk more about the bats here and some of the young ones, the young bats, because as we mentioned before, they weren't too aggressive in free agency regarding the offense. So I'm thinking that they are planning on some reinforcements from the minor league level, including a couple of the names you mentioned. So we'll come back with Joe Rampe of the Tigers Intelligence Report. Stick with us. You're listening to the Sports Project Primetime on Jethro FM. We're doing our baseball research here with Joe Rampe of the Tigers Intelligence Report, having a good conversation with him about kind of what to expect here from the Tigers and baseball as a whole. We were talking a little bit in the break, Jeff and I were, about the whole bat thing, because he was getting a little irritated with the mindset of, okay, clamoring for a bat, we got to get a bat. I look at this as a vote of confidence for what they have in the minor leagues, because one of the issues that I've raised with some of you guys, some of the pundits on my show, is it does feel like, and you used to cover the minor leagues pretty much extensively, it looks like they're confident in what they have up and what they have able to come up to the big leagues. And I do think there's a little bit of a logjam at the minor league level where they've got so much talent down there. They're brimming with talent. Every level played well into the playoffs. The Whitecaps had a historic season. Were nominated Team of the Year in their league. Erie played super well. We had Greg Gagnon often talking about that. Toledo, every level, they had a ton of talent. But at some point, there's almost like a pinch point in an organization where if you don't have headroom, it's the same if you work for a business or something like that. If you don't have headroom, then how are you going to progress? How are you going to advance your career? And so you can't necessarily acquire all of these bats at the major league level, because then you're starting to block guys that are making their way there. The Kevin McGonigals, the Max Clarks, the guys that are coming, and you want to give them a chance. Those are kind of the high-end prospects, along with Briseño and some others. But the guys you mentioned, Joe, guys like Hao Lee, Max Anderson, those are guys that I feel like probably will deserve a shot, and you've got to have some room for them. I'm not advocating, okay, don't sign Bregman if you've got a good chance and it's a salary level that you see fit for him and you feel like he's going to be a good fit, especially since he used to play for Hinch. But I think this is a vote of confidence in the young guys, saying, hey, we want to see what we've got out of these guys, and no, they may not be up right away, but they're coming.
Yeah, absolutely. And you know, the Scott Harris inherited a lot of the roster, but now we're starting to see some of his draft picks reach the point where they can start to become major leaguers. And I don't blame him for having confidence that these guys are going to perform well. And it's not just blind confidence either. You know, I check out the on Fangraphs, the Zips projections every year that Dan Zimborski, he created the Zips projection system. And to me, it does a pretty good job of setting like a baseline expectation. And according to him, according to his projection system, Max Clark and Kevin McGonigal would be two of the top 5 or 6 hitters on the Tigers this year by WAR. So I think I liked the idea of not necessarily clogging up the lineup with some sort of like mid-tier free agent when there are a lot of guys on the team that are either on the way, or guys like Parker Meadows and Matt Vierling who should be coming back stronger than what they were last year. And your point about Alex Bregman, to me, that's kind of the perfect example of the position that the Tigers were in this offseason, is that Bregman is most likely he is projected for somewhere around like 3 WAR this year, and he's an extremely solid player. But do you want to pay Alex Bregman $35 million a year for that 3 WAR, or do you bet on Colt Keith, who is most likely going to be the full-time third baseman, putting up numbers close to what Bregman can bring for 1/7 of the cost? And I think that's where the Tigers were in this offseason, is that they had so much depth and so many young guys that are either proven or like McGonigal and Clark have shown in the minors that they could hit the ground running when they do come up. I just think it was hard to upgrade the Tigers offense this winter, because you're paying so much for a marginal upgrade, that to me it made more sense to put those funds into the pitching staff.
Jeff's nodding his head at this one. I'm in agreement on this as well, because I do think that you've got to do some math on some of these things, because they do have a young core here with the Tigers that's progressing very nicely, including some of these draft picks that we're talking about. So you're going to need some funds to be able to sign those guys, and I think they're planning accordingly, knowing that there are going to be some bigger contracts down the pike. Yes, it always comes down to Skubal, but he's not the only one that they're going to have to consider re-signing as things progress here. So I know this has been something Jeff's been in agreement on, but I think he's got something for you here, Joe.
Yeah, and we can say confidently now that Bregman did not want to come to Detroit, right?
Yep. I'd agree.
I think he won a championship in Houston. To me, it was all about his numbers. He could hit home runs in Boston over the Green Monster, and now it's no coincidence he's in Chicago playing with the Cubs in that field where that ball sails out of there. You can't tell me for 1 minute that he did not have any. He played for A.J. Hinch, and I'm like, that has nothing to do with it. Bregman wants money, and he wants his numbers, and that's about it.
And like you said, I don't know if it was really against the Tigers. It was against Comerica Park.
Exactly.
That was specifically playing 81 games in that stadium. That was probably a no, don't you think, Joe?
Yeah, no, I agree 100%. And, one thing about Bregman is it does sound like when you talk about his contract, it's not just his offense, it's his defense. And he's pretty well respected, it sounds like, as a leader. And those things definitely have like multiplying effects on the rest of the team. But I think that the Tigers have some good clubhouse guys too. And yeah, that one to me, I think that Colt Keith is in for a breakout season. He made a lot of strides last year, and the one area that he didn't make a ton of strides in is in hitting home runs. But he was a big-time power hitter in the minor leagues. And I remember when Colt Keith got drafted, his first year down in Low A, he hit less than five home runs. And I remember reading an interview with him, and he was basically talking about, I just want to become a hitter first, and then I'll grow into my power, but I need to figure out how to hit first. And I think that he's going through that a little bit at the major league level too. He's trying to figure out how can I be a good hitter first, and then I'll grow into my power as I go. And I think that that's a good idea, and I think that he's in for a big year.
I agree. I think he's somebody that's kind of gotten forgotten about here, lost in the shuffle a little bit, but it hits on some of the things that we're talking about. He was a young guy that they developed and is on a team-friendly deal, what I view as a team-friendly deal. They signed him early, and I think he can grow to beyond that contract. He just needs a little bit more time, a little bit more seasoning, and to see more at the major league level. And he's put it together in stretches stretches, and he just needs to have some more consistency here. So I want to talk more about the bats. We're going to take another quick break and then come back with Joe Rampe of the Tigers Intelligence Report. Stick with us. You're listening to the Sports Project Primetime on Jethro FM.
From the GarbarinoRoofs.com studios.
Country with a twist. Jethro FM. 1530 AM. WYGR Wyoming Grand Rapids. 94.9 FM Grand Rapids. 99.5 FM Lowell. And Jethro South. 980 AM WAKV Otsego Plainwell. 98.9 FM Otsego. And 105.1 FM Kalamazoo. Available worldwide at jethro.fm.
The first one being Joe Rampe of the Tigers Intelligence Report, having a good conversation and season preview here. Needed to get one more segment so we can talk about some of those bats a little bit more. I think you brought up a great point, Joe, about Colt Keith. I'm curious to see what else happens with the improvement of the existing bats too, because we talked a little bit about the minor league guys possibly coming up and making an impact by the end of the year. But I also think there's room for improvement even in some of the better players. Riley Green is looking at the mechanics of his swing. Torkelson had a great start to the year, but there were the splits in general for the team were not great as far as first half, second half for a lot of the players. So hopefully they can find some consistency. But I think the big thing on the hitting side as well is also not oversaturating any of the bats, getting them consistent looks and also mixing in some rest and being able to have confidence in some of those guys that are the next man up. I felt like they were chasing for most of the year last year, but then they discovered guys like Jahmai Jones and some other guys that did fill in and do pretty well. But with the reinforcements coming in the minor leagues and hopefully a healthy Vierling, Meadows, some of those guys that you mentioned, Joe, I think those things will help the bats and show the fans maybe they didn't need a lot more help than what's actually already on the roster.
Yeah, absolutely. It makes me think of, if you're counting on improvement or a player taking a leap, would you think of that more as like a mid-tier free agent that you're hoping has a career year, or more so that these guys on the Tigers that are 24 to 27 years old that are just entering their prime? I think that there's a lot of Tigers performed above expectations last year, and I think that gave some fans some concern about this year because it's like, well, the water kind of found its level last year. I was just looking it up earlier, and I think through July 8th, when the Tigers were 25 games over 500, they had scored the sixth most runs in baseball. And from July 9th on, I think that they were down at 23rd. And so people will rightfully point to that and say, that some of those guys came crashing back down to earth. But the team is made up of a lot of guys that are just entering their prime, and I think that it's more likely that several guys take a step up this year than it is that they deal with a lot of the regression that people are worried about.
I agree. I do think that Jeff and I talk about this a decent amount because we talk about kind of the sports radio landscape and how we do it a little differently here on these shows. But I don't think people take full account of what actually is going on, like a team age and major league time and things like that. These are guys, sure, okay, I get that Torkelson had high expectations when he came to the big leagues. He's still a fairly young player that could have some development. Same with Riley Green, who a lot of people would identify as kind of a five-tool player at this point. He is a great player. He's a budding superstar, but he has room for improvement. That's not a criticism. That's more hopeful than anything that he can maybe take the next step up. But Jeff and I like to be a little bit more positive on these shows than some of our friends on the other shows, don't we, Jeff?
Yeah, we do. And Joe, I was going to ask you, how much pressure is on Parker Meadows to get off to a good start, knowing that to me, when he's not confident, I mean, it's prominent. You can see it from, I mean, your eyes don't lie when he's not swinging the bat with confidence. How much concern and how much pressure is on Parker Meadows to get off to a fast start, knowing we've got guys on his heels in Toledo?
Yeah, his year last year, I kind of give him a pass because he had to battle through so many injuries, and it's hard enough to hit a baseball. But just imagine having to go through all the he missed all of spring training. He was never able to get into a groove. So my hope with Parker Meadows is his career batting line is something like a 95 WRC plus, which means it's about 5% below league average. And if he can hit at that level with his defense and his base running, he will be like a 3-WAR player next year. But his situation reminds me of a lot of major leaguer situations in that there's always someone coming for your spot. And he doesn't have to look far to see that Max Clark is right here. And if it's not Max Clark, it could be Matt Vierling. It could be Wenzel Perez. So the Tigers are 2 to 3 guys deep at most positions. So I think there's going to be a lot of pressure on guys, but I think that's a good thing. And I have high hopes for Meadows this year. And just imagine an outfield with Parker Meadows in center and Max Clark in one of the corners, how good they'd be defensively. So even if Max does make his way up to Detroit this year, I think that there's still room for both him and Parker Meadows. But yeah, I'm sure that Parker Meadows is feeling a little bit of pressure this year, not only because of last year, but because Max Clark is on his way.
Jeff and I are having a good conversation here with Joe Rampe of the Tigers Intelligence Report. I think that's a good point, Joe, because that was one of the weaknesses at the beginning of the year last year. I remember it was a bit of a scramble to kind of put together that outfield with some of the injuries, including 2 Meadows, as you mentioned. So I think having a little bit more as far as reinforcements go, obviously that's going to be better. I know Brandon brought up an interesting point that I hadn't thought of before. He was also talking about kind of the longer levers of Meadows, and obviously that's great for him kind of galloping in that open center field, but that also could mean that maybe there's more injuries on the horizon. Not that it was a prediction, but Clark's built a little differently than Meadows is.
Yeah, and those long levers, that's a great point about him getting into a rhythm too. He got into a huge rhythm in the second half of 2024. And he was probably the Tigers' best player. And so you just have to hope that he can get into a better rhythm this year because he's as talented as any player on the roster. But that was a great point by Brandon. Some guys they're so athletic that it reminds me a little bit of Byron Buxton with the Twins. It's like there's sometimes a trade-off to being that athletic, and it can happen with injuries. We've seen it with Mike Trout, but I've got high hopes for Meadows this year, and let's just hope that the injury bug doesn't hit.
I'm not making any predictions here, but I thought that was a good note, and then maybe that does open the door for somebody like Clark or trying to see what the composition, the outfield looks like. But I think there's a lot of possibilities this year. And when you kind of do go through the scenarios of, okay, what if this person gets hurt or what can we see from this place? I think there are a lot of places where people can fill in and then make like a McKinstry, Baez, guys that we haven't talked about much in this interview so far, go more into those utility roles where they're more valuable because I know Baez playing center field was pretty novel last year and it worked pretty well, Jeff.
Very fun at times.
But
yes.
It's probably better as a short-term thing. That's kind of my main theme for this interview so far is a lot of the things that worked in the short term, let's keep them in the short term. Let's keep Tommy Canley in the short term. Let's keep Baez maybe not doing a ton of reps in center field, but knowing that that's an option depending on what kind of lineup you want to put out there. But I think those chess pieces for Hinch are there and are coming, and so then he can manipulate them how he sees fit, Joe, and that could lead to some good things here for the season.
Totally agree.
But great stuff, Joe. We really appreciate you joining the show. I wanted to make sure to direct people to this new outfit that you guys have going here with Lynn, because it's right up my alley, especially on the sports intel side. Yeah,
no, it's been great. It was funny that he announced it. It just so happened that a Tiger sports writing legend announced his new venture on the same day that Verlander came back. So that was fitting. But yeah, it's on Substack, and it's Tiger's Intelligence Report. Lynn is incredible to me. He's kind of set the standard of what of Tiger sports writing over the years. So it's an honor to be doing it with him. And yeah, please check us out at Tiger's Intelligence Report on Substack.
Definitely check them out. It's a lot of great stuff, very information heavy in the best possible way, but well written and well conveyed. And we'll be trying to get Joe and Lynn on Sports Intel and on the station as a whole. So we appreciate you joining us, Joe, and we'll look forward to talking to you again soon.
Sounds great. Thanks for having me.
All right. Thanks, Joe. Take care.
The Sports Project.